showing up today. I am Kelly DeMail. I've been with Keller Williams for, since it started, basically, minus a few months. Jim and I came around at the same time, so it's been about, 11 years now, Jim?
Yep.
Yeah. And before that, I worked for a custom home builder for a few years. I am a licensed broker, even though I'm not the broker for our office. I am a licensed broker, so I'm happy to answer any questions at any time if you guys ever have any questions. I've taught a lot of these paperwork classes before, and we've gone through a lot of the forms. Today, we're not going to go through all of the forms. We're really going to concentrate on the changes that have taken place this year on the forms. And I'm not going to go through every single change in terms of, you don't have a packet of all of those forms, but I have in your packet kind of a highlight sheet that Minnesota sent to us that kind of outlines a lot of the main changes that we're gonna see, or that you may see, and then we're really going to just go through the purchase agreement and look at what's changed there. Okay. At any time, if you have questions, raise your hand, holler, and we'll address those. Okay. So I apologize if your packet is not necessarily in the correct order, but you should have a purchase agreement in there. You should have a form that looks like this. It's just a 2-page form, and this is the one I'm going to bring to your attention first. It was sent to us from the Minnesota Association of Realtors that just tells you what forms had changes made to them in 2017. So you may never use some of these. You may use them all the time. I just want to let you know that, that's what's been changed. Okay. So you have a complete list. The other thing you're going to have in your packet, which we're actually going to kind of touch on first, is this. It's called Form Revisions in August. Okay, we got this. You probably all saw this email come to you. I don't know if you read through it. So what I did is I took that form for you, and I actually went through and just kind of highlighted what's the key thing. So when you go through it, you'll see my highlights in here, okay? So I want to go through this, kind of touch on those forms, and then we'll look at that purchase agreement. Renee, did you have a question?
Yeah. So all of the forms that have changes are correct in the transaction desk. They're all updated.
As far as I know, they should be. There's actually when I went into transaction desk, there's a folder that says 2017 NAR forms. Okay, so you want to look at that. Okay. All right, so let's just look at this forms revision coming August 1st packet. And I just want to kind of go through that. The first main change is that, we used to have to number pages, and I would probably bet 99% of us didn't do it, right? Up in the corner, we had to accumulate a cumulative total of what those pages are. We don't have to do that anymore, which is really kind of nice. Yeah. So they were already pre-numbered, based on how many pages are in that particular form. And then obviously they've eliminated a lot of the addendum, which makes it a lot easier. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. And the second page on one thing that they wanted to let you know is with vacant land, we always had a vacant land disclosure. Hi, John, you grab a packet there. We always had a vacant land disclosure, but it never included anything in regards to radon. And so they added the radon verbiage in the vacant land disclosure because they believed that vacant property or vacant land ultimately has the intent of somebody building or living there, right? So they wanted to just add that disclosure to make the consumer, aware, and to create the obligation on the seller to disclose if they know of any radon. Okay, kind of weird for vacant land, but I get the ultimate intent or end use of that product. Right? Then under broker compensation initials, on certain forms, so the facilitator service agreement for both buyer and seller, they actually changed the broker compensation portion of those forms to conform with the listing contract form, just showing how a broker could get compensated so that they really just kind of all look the same no matter what form that you're using, okay? This is a big one, recording showings. This is, now with all this new technology and smart homes and nests and all of that good stuff, you have the ability to have cameras, in a lot of these homes. And so, hello, come on in. So now they have language was added to the facilitator agreements, to the listing agreements, to the one-time showing contracts in regards to recorded showings. So when you are going to your listing appointments and you're meeting with your sellers, you need to have this conversation of, do you have any equipment in your home that records, that basically provides video to you? If that is the case, you cannot record showings without the express consent of one of the two parties that will be showing. So either the agent or the buyer, right? Okay, and that's specific in there. So you need to make sure your seller knows there is now Minnesota statute in regards to this. I mean, there's a law that says you cannot record showings to gain the upper hand in negotiations, to get honest feedback, or for any other reasons without the consent of the people looking at your home or the agent. Okay? That's something very new. The next section highlighted, it just says overhaul of all purchase agreements. So obviously we're going to go through that in more detail, but obviously you guys have seen, if you've written a purchase agreement since August, you've seen that the purchase agreement looks different, right? We don't have the basic financing addendums. We don't have the inspection contingency addendum. They're eliminating a lot of that, just obviously to help just with the tracking of documents and the ease. There was several forms eliminated in this big red box here on page 6. Just gives you a list of all the forms that will be eliminated going forward. Okay, any questions on that and the elimination of those forms? Okay, good. So just some things to highlight, and we'll go through this again when we look at the purchase agreement, but in all the purchase agreements, basically, what I've highlighted here, it says they've changed where the taxes, when we looked at how taxes would be either prorated or paid in full by whatever party, when we designate that on the purchase agreement, they've changed the verbiage to just say payable in the year of closing versus payable in 2000, and we specified. And they did that primarily for the fact that when we write an offer towards the end of the year with an intent to have it closed before the end of the year, and now all of a sudden the closing gets pushed to the beginning of the new year, now we have to do an amendment to change the verbiage, right? So now we don't have to do that anymore. Okay. They also changed right away in the beginning of the purchase agreement where we used to, for earnest money, we would just check that it goes to the listing broker, right? So now it's just, you can put listing broker or check here, earnest money holder. And sometimes that could be the seller, right? If it's a for sale by owner, it could be an attorney's office, it could be, somebody else. So you can check that and designate who will be holding the earnest money. Any questions on that? Okay. And then just a note that it says on the purchase agreement with new construction, the second option in that is, it says unless otherwise agreed to in writing, but to be returned to the buyer. Wait, maybe buyer if the purchase agreement is not accepted by builder. So just know that the earnest money verbiage will be different, a little bit different on the new construction purchase agreement as far as how that earnest money gets handled. Okay, if you're in here and you deal with a lot of new construction, that purchase agreement is a little bit different. They also changed in the section of our purchase agreement that deals with fixtures, appurtenances, things like that about the property, where it lists everything that's attached. They did modify radon mitigation system to now read environmental remediation system. Okay, and it will say vapor intrusion radon, whatever. Okay. Again, on the new construction purchase agreements, they have added some new verbiage, especially in regards to the special well construction area. Now, if you don't do new construction, you probably don't even know what that means or what we have to do with that. And we're actually pretty lucky in this part of the state. If you actually went on to the Minnesota, I think it's the health website, Department of Health, it will tell you where the special well construction areas are, and they're really more in the northern, central to northern part of Minnesota. We don't have any of that as far as I noticed down in our county. But this would be if there are certain areas where there are known contaminants or suspected contaminants in the water, and then that has to be disclosed if you live in those areas, okay? Again, we probably won't run into it too much down here, but that's what that's for. When we get to listing contracts, the big changes on our listing contracts is in regards to the access to the property, okay? So now what it's saying is, hey, Mr. Seller, by signing this listing agreement or this listing contract with us, you are agreeing to allow access to the property. You are allowing, or you are authorizing other brokers, their salespersons, their inspector, the appraiser, contractors, and other professionals in the industry basically to access your property with reasonable notice to basically get us from here to closing, right? And it also says that they agree to allow us to make a duplicate set of keys, okay? So those are some nice new changes. The key thing is, and I've highlighted this whole bottom paragraph, is that when they're saying authorize other brokers, ... that means giving the broker permission to allow any of the above referenced persons to get access to their property with or without a salesperson being present. Okay, so now I don't have clarification. I have Bruce calling Michelle Smith, our attorney, to make sure that, you know, do we need still the okay, like call to let them know, hey, the inspector's coming, I won't be there, you know, to let them in. So still proceed as we normally do to get the okay if that's the plan, you know, until we tell you differently. But we are, you know, through the contract, getting the okay from the seller that with or without a salesperson being present, if they are authorized to get into our lockbox, they're able to come into the property to do what they need to do without us being present. Okay? Yeah.
Why would you do the duplicate key? I mean,
you know, a perfect example, and we make a duplicate key on all of our listings because we've had agents forget to put it back in the lockbox and they walk off, it's in their pocket. Something gets lost. I hate to say that this happened to me once. I was showing a house. I went like this to lock the door. I'm going to put it back in the lockbox. I drop the key and it falls in the crack between the cement block and the house. Guess what? I don't know where that's allowed. So yeah, so I mean, there's lots of different reasons, you know, and maybe it's their only set of keys, and they're giving it to you, and so they want you to make a duplicate set for the lockbox. So there's lots of various reasons, but they're giving you the okay. So when you're going through your listing contract, make sure you're going over these specific things, because if all of a sudden they go, hey, I didn't know you made an extra set of my keys, well, you know, if you just address it right up front, it allows me to be able to do these things to adequately, you know, service your listing. Okay. The other thing of that is that it also says that they understand that potential buyers or agents may be coming in to take photographs of their house, right? Nowadays, we quickly video with our phones, we can do anything. And the contract and the new verbiage says that they're okay with that unless they tell us otherwise. So again, that's something that you should be explaining to your sellers right when you're taking that listing contract. If you are not okay with people videotaping your home or taking pictures, then you need to let me know so that I can let them know, okay? And then they also changed the verbiage about securing valuables. So on the listing contract, and I did provide you guys a copy of that, and I've highlighted it on the contract, so you can see exactly where that is. It used to just say, you know, make sure that you safeguard your valuables during property showings or open houses. And they changed that verbiage to just basically say during the time of this contract, because we have, you know, other people be coming in, inspectors, things like that, and we just want to have ourselves covered from a liability standpoint. Okay. Now the rest of this form is all in regards to commercial form changes, which I am not going to touch on today. That's not my area of expertise. If you are a commercial agent, you'll probably want to review those changes, okay? So that's kind of a quick overview, but now I wanted to just go through it on the purchase agreement so you can kind of see where those all pan out, okay? So before we get started, there's a couple new agents in here. I always usually talk about agency, which we don't have in this little packet of our forms, but we all know that agency is the first form, right? No matter what we do, whenever we're talking to someone, whether we go for just a showing, or they, stop you at the grocery store and say, hey, Dustin, heard you're selling real estate, and, I just wanted to tell you about us getting ready to sell our house and blah, blah, blah. You need to go, that's awesome, and I'm buying groceries right now, so let's set up a time to talk so that you can, make sure that you have agency, right? Or, I need to get you some information about how we can represent you. So I'm going to email that form to you, and I'd like to go over that with you, if you're not in a position where you can present it. I always have those forms with me. You should always have those forms with you when you can, because you really need to get that in the buyer's or the seller's hands as soon as possible, okay? So I'll say that in all my forms classes because it's the most important form out of everything that we do. Any questions on agency? And if anybody has questions about scripts, I feel uncomfortable presenting it, I don't know how, I'm happy to meet with you, role play with you guys, whatever, just contact me after class, okay? All right, so purchase agreement, I have highlighted these things for you so you don't have to try to find them. I just highlighted on line 7 and 9 just the fact that they've changed that earnest money box. It no longer just says listing broker. You can check if it's going to somebody other than the listing broker and designate who that is. Line 21 I've highlighted, that's where they made that environmental remediation system verbiage change versus just radon system. Lines 37 through 42. This is really cool. I've just highlighted that because, again, this is kind of the look change to the purchase agreement. It used to look very different at the bottom of page 1, so I've just highlighted that this area is different. You can see that through the purchase agreement, they've kind of they put bold headings, so we definitely know we're kind of going into a new part of the purchase agreement, which is kind of easy to find. You're going to designate, is it a cash purchase? Is it going to be financed, right? A mortgage financing, meaning conventional FHA or VA. If that's the case, we don't have to attach an addendum anymore, right? It just says, see the following mortgage financing section. But number 3 and 4, if you are buying a home through assumption or through a contract for deed, those will still need that addendum attached. Okay, so those are the 2 situations where you will need an addendum. Okay, and then obviously we write in the closing date. Now the next change on the top of page 2 is different as well. Line 49, this purchase agreement is or is not contingent upon mortgage financing provisions below. Okay, so now you're going to check or fill in all of the mortgage information. I understand that maybe in team meetings or in other classes, Zach and his history of doing this is a little different than how we'd like for you to do it here. So I'm going to teach you the right way to do it and why, okay? So if you have a buyer that is getting a conventional loan, it is important for you to know if it's a conventional loan or an insured conventional loan. And first of all, do you guys know what the difference is? Okay, Renee, what's the difference?
You just need less money down for the insured conventional, and they have to pay that.
The PMI.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if you're a 20% down buyer, you are a conventional buyer, right? If you're less than 20% down, we have PMI attached to that, right? Private mortgage insurance. So that means you are an insured conventional buyer. And if the state of Minnesota thinks it's important enough for us to check the difference, I'm going to tell you, you need to make sure that you're checking the correct one. So it's either conventional or it's privately insured conventional. And the main reason is that just because you're a less than 20% down buyer does not guarantee that you get approved for PMI, right? So the bank submits that loan for PMI coverage. And Megan and I have a history of being loan officers for many years prior to being real estate agents, and we've seen that get denied. Not very often, but it does happen. So from a basically a transparency of presenting the true and true picture of your buyer's financing situation, you should be checking the correct box. Okay. The other reason I don't like just conventional being checked is that our rural housing is a conventional loan, but I sure would think as a seller, you'd want to know if your buyer is a rural housing buyer, not just conventional, thinking they're just a conventional buyer, right? So really do your due diligence, know what your buyer is approved for, what type of program, so that you can check the appropriate boxes. And especially when it comes to FHA loans or VA loans, or DVA is the real name for it. There's a lot of rules and regulations. There's a lot of things they can and can't do. So not that you have to be the loan expert, but you just need to know what questions to ask, or to go to that lender to say, what do I need to know in regards to costs, things that are allowed and not allowed for the type of finance.
So are you saying rural development is a conventional loan?
Rural development it's a conventional loan.
So would you mark both of those?
Nope, you would
Yes.
mark, you would.
Yep, you can check more than one box. That's why it says check all that apply.
There you go, you can. I probably wouldn't, but it's not gonna hurt, right? It's still conventional, but
Same with
they
the
need to
FHA,
know.
when they have the MHFA gift for their down
True.
payment. You can check FHA and Minnesota Housing Finance.
That's probably a better. I mean, rural housing there is no difference, but Megan's example of you can get an FHA loan and get down payment assistance, or, assistance through MHFA. So again, the seller would want to know that, right? And should know that information. So give your best, true picture of your buyer's finances. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. And if you guys are not familiar with the differences of these loans, reach out to the lender you use, and just say, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Just give me a quick little rundown, so make some notes, just so you know the basics. Again, you don't have to know every single thing about the program, but you should know some key differences, so that when you are working with buyers and they start telling you certain things about their situation, it'll click. Oh, this might be a better program, or oh, this might be what we need to do based on your situation. Okay, it's always good for you to be a little bit more informed.
And I know it's, it is what it is, but why didn't they put the privately insured conventional into the conventional?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no clue. Yeah. So anyway, so just make sure that you're checking that correctly. And I just highlighted, you'll see two other highlights of notes, throughout here, where I just highlighted the little section where it says, if this purchase agreement is subject to VA loans or FHA financing, some things may be prohibited, or may not be able to be done. So again, just know what your buyer is buying with, and check with the lender if you need to, ask a question in regards to what's allowable. Okay. Again, I'm just skimming through this as far as the changes. If you guys want to go through any particular part of the purchase agreement when we're done with this, please holler and we'll answer any questions. So if we skip over to page 5. Page 5, under sale of buyer's property. So this is where you're letting the seller know that your buyer this offer is contingent upon them selling a property. Number 2, contingent upon the successful close of a purchase agreement they already have accepted on their property. Or 3, there's no contingency of selling a property, to move forward with this purchase agreement. Okay, does everybody understand that? Because that was a change as well from the last time, and now we've just got a new look to this. Okay, and then I've highlighted down below under real estate taxes. Again, that's where they changed the verbiage to say payable in the year of closing versus actually specifically writing in a year. Okay. Any questions on that? Lovely. Okay. Next page, I just highlighted the additional provisions section just to let you know. It just looks a little different. They kind of reworded a few things, but it really didn't change much. But bottom line, is this contingent upon a previously written purchase agreement? And if so, when does it need to be canceled by? Okay. Okay, and then on the last page, or page 8, I shouldn't say last page anymore. Again, I've just highlighted on line 334, I think I highlighted on yours. Maybe I didn't. It's just, again, the verbiage has changed. It's not listing broker anymore, it's earnest money holder to relate back to that change they made on the first couple lines of the purchase agreement. Okay. So you probably wouldn't even have noticed that changed, but we're just pointing out that it just is going to coincide with that now the correct verbiage. Okay. And I think the only other thing on the purchase agreement I wanted to point out was on line 471 on the last page. This is where you're going to check what addenda is attached. Okay, so they've eliminated a lot of the basic stuff, but you might have a unique situation where you had to attach, you know, a certain addendum to it, or like if you sell a townhome, you've got to have that CIC, I mean, the common interest community addendum, you know, things like that. So just make sure that you're checking everything that should be a part of this. For simplicity, obviously return packets in. If a page gets detached or lost, or they pick it up, and you should have had something checked and it's not checked, they don't know to look for it. So just make sure that you as the agent, your job is to make sure everything is filled out correctly, okay? And so make sure you're checking what should be attached. And we always do that, you know, on the signature page as well. If you are negotiating an offer and now you have a counter offer, you need to make sure that that box on 491 is checked so that everybody knows there's a counter offer addendum that should go along with this purchase agreement, okay? So another thing I really want to touch on is with this new purchase agreement, there's a lot of stuff that we don't check now, right? I mean, it's because we aren't adding the addendum, it's all in here. There's choices that you can pick, but then there's a lot of blank spots. That's okay. We don't want you to cross things off and muddy up the paperwork, okay? Just leave it blank, or you can even put an NA if you feel better, you know, especially on this last page, right before you check all the addenda, there's a huge section in there, right? You know, even if you were to just put NA on the first line, then that lets everybody know nothing was written in that. Or if you are drafting your purchase agreements through Transaction Desk, there is a part where it allows you to do a, you know, a cross through. You can do that if it's computer generated. I don't want you know, hand writing your pen through that or through any section, because what that tells us is somebody crossed something off, and we don't know if it was before everybody signed, after people signed. Whenever you're crossing things off, then we got to get initials, and then it gets really messy. I should have brought in a addendum I got back from somebody yesterday. It was just unbelievable. We submitted an inspection addendum, and they came back and they had everything crossed off, things written in, changed and initialed, and then they signed the bottom and sent it back to us. And I was just like, wow, like you can't even read this anymore. And that's what they thought was acceptable. It's just it's very difficult to read contracts when they've got stuff scratched off. So it's a major change after you've gotten a purchase agreement in place and accepted, and now you need to change something. You know, we do it on an addendum, or we do the counter offer, you know, if we're still in the negotiation section. But don't cross things off, okay? That's not acceptable. Okay, any questions on that? I know there's been some difference of opinion, so.
You teach this class next.
Yeah, I know, we should, yeah. It's, like I said, we can only be the best agents we can be. We can't make sure that they are. So, you know, that's the perfect example with my amendment, is that I called that agent and said, you know, we're agreeing to your changes. However, we're gonna redraft this amendment so that we can read it, and then we'll get it over, which we did. You know, so unfortunately it may take a little educating on our part to help other agents out there, but you know, that also shows that we're the best trained agents out there. So, you know, be that better agent, right?
So on that same note, I had an agent that went through everything on the first page, from lines 16 through 28, all of the things that are included. They went through and drew a line through everything that seller did not have. So like underground sprinkler system, they drew a line, which means technically everyone should be initialing every single line, not just that paragraph, whatever. And the agent would listen to me when I said, I can't submit this, my broker won't allow it, my legal department won't allow it. So I actually talked to Bruce ahead of time and then emailed Bruce and had him email me back the verbiage that I needed from him to send it to that agent to say, we can't do it like that.
Yeah, it just muddies it up. I mean, bottom
So
line,
if
if
you
you,
can't, like when you can't get an agent to listen to you and they're like, this is how I always do it or whatever, it's like, it doesn't matter, that's not right. So,
well, and if they really were to read this section, it just says, you know, that this offer shall include all improvements, fixtures, and appurtenances on the property, if any.
right.
So it's not saying that they're all included. We're just saying if they're there, they're included unless we exclude them, right? Or maybe, you know, you read in the MLS that they're excluding the drapes or the whatever, right? So then you have to make sure you're including that stuff. So check your MLS and do that. But yeah, it's just, again, uneducated agents out there. So instead of getting mad, just help educate them and tell them, you know, Keller Williams has got some great training. You should maybe, you know, feel free to come join us when we do our forms class next time.
I gotta ask,
Yes.
the disclosure, the seller's disclosure,
Mm-hmm.
there's no place on here to check that it's included.
Yep, there is.
Where's that at? I missed it.
It's on,
Oh. Okay,
whether
yeah,
there's,
The addenda.
probably, and we still include it on page 8 of the purchase.
Absolutely. I mean, you're
Okay.
writing an offer, right, for your buyer, which means
Okay,
by Minnesota, you know, what we're required to do is make sure that your buyer has seen a copy of that disclosure
okay.
prior to you writing an offer. So if you don't have that disclosure and you know your buyer's interested in a property and the agent hasn't put that disclosure on Flex, which a lot of them don't do, call that agent, have them email you a copy, okay?
I just missed it in here.
Yeah.
I was thinking it had to be on this page 11.
Okay, yeah. So any questions on the purchase agreement? And I know, like I said, I've got a few new agents. We've got some experienced agents that now with the changes, any situations you guys have come across or? No? Okay,
Changes.
I think they're great. Yeah, so much easier, just not having to attach everything and go. Good, okay. So the other thing I just wanted to go over is I printed out the listing contract. Does everybody have a copy of that listing contract as well? You don't, Megan?
They're different kinds of stuff.
Well, I think she only had so many. She might have run short here. So let me grab one. There you go. Anybody else missing it from their packet? Okay. So I just wanted to go over, show you some of the changes here. Before we get into the listing contract, when you guys go take your listings, you know, obviously we have to fill out the data sheet for the MLS. There are copies, I'm sure Nikki's got them. If not, we can make copies of this. This is that MLS data entry cheat sheet. Pretty much walks you through every single line of the data entry form so that you know what you need to have. You know, what is required information for the listing, what is, you know, extra. You want to make sure that you're turning in complete data forms. Obviously, it makes Nikki's job so much easier. She does not have time to go track you down or look up the answers herself. If it were me, I would instruct her that if she didn't get a complete one, she doesn't put it in, you know, until you give her a complete sheet. So really do your best job.
have that sheet.
If not, you certainly are more than welcome to take mine and make a copy, but MLS office will have these too. They can send you a copy, but just, I mean, it's honest to God, it's like Cliff Notes. It's just, you know, listings for dummies. You can go through line by line. It tells you all the options you can fill in there and you fill it in, okay? So,
I used to
well, but I'm just saying, you know, yeah, I'm with you, because you know, how many times you're like, okay, yeah, right, what are the options there, you know? So just, you know, if you don't know, have one of these handy because they're great, okay? And obviously, the better job we can do on our end really helps our staff, you know, be more efficient, and that's what we want. Okay, so the exclusive right to sell listing contract, again, I've just highlighted a couple things in here. You go to the second page down the line 79 and 80. This is where they changed that verbiage to say the seller shall remain responsible basically for all your stuff, safeguard your valuables, your property during the term of this contract, not just during showings or open houses. Okay, so that's where that verbiage change happened. Okay. On the top of page 3, this is that whole section I have highlighted here that is that new verbiage in regards to the access to the property, saying that you can get in there, you're authorizing other people, related to this transaction to get in there through the lockbox, and that you're able to make the duplicate keys. Okay, so this is really, to me, a very important part of the listing agreement. To the seller, this is what listing a house is about, right? All they know is who's coming in, how are they getting in, how am I going to know that they're coming? So this is a part of the listing agreement really you should spend some time on just going over it. By signing this, you're okay letting me come in, letting other real estate professionals come in through the lockbox. And I always make a set of keys, or I can make a set of keys if you'd prefer, okay? And then of course, line 100, super big thing now is the recording of the property. Any questions on those changes? Okay.
Was that there before that the seller understands the prospective buyers and others authorized to access the property may report the property by photograph video? So buyers who come in and take pictures.
Yeah, and it says unless they inform the listing agent, so if you're sitting down with your client, you need to explain this paragraph. This paragraph says you are okay with prospective buyers or agents taking photographs or videos of the home when they're here. Are you okay with that? And so that's why I'm really highlighting this, because I don't want you to blow over that and say, when you're presenting to your seller, hey, this just says we can get access to a property, I'll make a set of keys, and you can't record anything. You're not explaining this accurately, right? And next time.
So if they say no on that, where would you do that? If they say, I don't want people coming through and taking pictures.
Then I think there's a part on the MLS where you can check no photos, but you can also put in the agent remarks, no photos, no pictures, no, yep. Let your agent know that. Yeah, or by agent. I would just say, seller does not want photos taken. Well, that would be prior to the listing. They're just saying prospective, yeah, yeah. Okay.
So would you cross that out? How would you indicate that they said that?
Well, there's an addendum to the listing contract, right? You could write it in there. You could probably write it for our last line here, right on line 225. Yeah, there's definitely places you could write it in. So, but then again, don't forget when you go put in the listing to include that information. Okay. I think very few people are opposed to it, but we have had a few. Some people have some pretty expensive collections, that they don't want photographed and they don't want that getting out. Afraid someone might be casing the joint, right? Oh, you got some valuables, great, go back and tell your friends. Next thing you know, your house is broken into, So, if you're in that situation, you're gonna obviously advise your seller to maybe pack that stuff away anyway, but not everybody listens to us, right?
That's kind of like tenants that wouldn't let anybody in with a home.
Right.
She's afraid they're gonna take pictures.
Oh. That is actually a really great point. When you look at this access to property thing, it also says in here that the seller cannot obstruct. Where does it say? Seller agrees to commit no act which might tend to obstruct the broker's performance here. So by signing this, if they've signed it and you've explained it correctly and they've agreed to it, and now we're through the process and now they say, you know what, we're not available to have that inspector come in, for 2 weeks. We're on vacation and we don't want to be bothered. Well, they can't do that, right? They can't hinder the process of the loan, okay, or the transaction. Okay. I know I didn't go through this line by line, which we've done in other classes where we've really taken these forms and deconstructed them, but are there any questions or scenarios that you guys are running into? Or boy, every time I go over that form, I forget how to explain this. Anything like that you have questions on? No? Any forms that you have questions on other than what we've talked about? Okay, cool. I try to make it short this time because normally I talk a lot. So if you, honestly, if you guys have any questions on anything, come see me anytime. Call me, email me, call Bruce, he's the broker. I'm happy to answer. If we don't know or he doesn't know, he will put a call into Michelle Smith, our attorney, to get the answer. This business is not a black and white business. It is a very gray business. So what we were told 2 years ago may not necessarily be the case as it is today. So if you find you're in a difficult position, you know, call and ask first, and then we'll try to get you the best answer.
I have a question that was raised the other day in a team meeting. Jennifer Walsh asked, when it comes to the days for the inspection,
Yeah.
when you have, you know, it's 10 days, 15 days, whatever you put in there, starts after, or however it's worded, with the
Contingency?
final acceptance date.
Yeah.
Is final acceptance date day 1 or day 0?
No, I think it's day 0. So
that's
it
how
would
we
be
all thought.
24 hours, right? It'd be the next day is day 1, the next day is day 1. Yeah, that's how I understand.
Because she had somebody else tell her no.
Yeah, that is, I mean, granted, I've never called to get that confirmed, but that's how I understand it. I mean, if we signed it today, because let's say you don't get it signed till 11:30 at night, you can't take off 1 full day of the calendar, you know, already.
Right. You wouldn't
So it would be 1 day, yeah, because you would have 14 days or whatever you put in there, so 11:59 that, you know, of that final day. And it is calendar days, again, remember that was a change they did last year. Calendar days, not business days. And that's to settle everything, do the inspection, ask for the repairs or the requests, negotiate all of that. And so we are finding that we're running into situations where we make the request, right, and the seller sits on it for 4 days or whatever, and they're getting it back to you with a day left, you know, I mean, that's,
So the buyer doesn't ask till there's only a day left.
right. So just, you know, as an agent, you guys need to be able to advise your clients and let them know as a buyer, we want to get the response or the request in so that they have time to evaluate, get bids, do whatever they need to do and get back to us. You know, when you represent a buyer, bottom line, if they don't wait, I mean, if they wait till too late and they don't get it in, it's moving forward. Right? I mean, so it's not like you're canceling the purchase agreement, you know, it's moving forward. So let's get this done so that we can have a timely fashion on resolving these requests. Cool. Any other questions, guys, before we wrap it up and grab some lunch? Thank you for coming. And like I said, call me if you have any questions. Help yourself to some food.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yes, you're welcome.